Hello, it's Mr. Bannister here, Head of Sixth Form, with an extended video presentation launching our higher education programme to Year 12 students as well as parents and carers. The primary focus of this presentation will be introducing you to the UCAS process, which is the mechanism through which you apply for university, talking to you about what you can be doing now to get ready for that application, and outlining the programme of support that the school will have in place over the next 11 months to ensure that you're able to submit applications that are well in line with your own aspirations and that give you the best possible chance of being able to pursue the university courses that you want to. Before I get into the detail of the presentation, I'm just going to make a few introductory comments, giving some context to what we're going through here. So under normal circumstances, we would run two separate events to do this briefing. The first would be a presentation to students, and we would normally do that in the hall in an assembly format during our Wednesday afternoon enrichment slot. And then we would normally do a follow-up evening event for parents and carers to come and hear much the same information. Because of the context we're working in at the moment, we've decided just to do this one pre-recorded video presentation for everybody to watch. We always deliver the same information really to students and parents. The variation comes more in the sort of accompanying verbal analysis that I would give. So in this video presentation, I'm going to direct it primarily at students, but I will make some comments as we go along that are more specific to parents and carers as well. And hopefully it will make everyone feel sort of comfortable with the process. The second notice that I want to give is really to very clearly state here at the outset our philosophy behind higher education as a school. The way that we see our job or conceptualize our job here is very much to make students aware of the huge variety of options that are available to them, to give you as students the opportunity and the skills to explore all of those options and determine your own aspirations, and then to give you as much support as possible to pursue the opportunities that you have decided are right. What we're not in the business of doing is pushing anyone down a path that they don't want to go down, that's not well aligned with their interests. Okay, so it happens that the vast majority of our students apply to university, and we have great success with students getting into Russell Group universities and Oxbridge, but we're equally as proud of our students who pursue apprenticeships or art foundation courses as we are of those who are able to get into Oxbridge or pursue more traditional academic subjects like sciences or English or history. You know, the goal for us is making sure that you as our students are happy and confident and well supported in going down the path that you want to tread with your life. The final sort of notice before we really begin is to acknowledge the varying levels of thought and anxiety that you as students might have about this process as well. So I'm imagining that you will all span quite a broad spectrum. There will be some students who have given this lots and lots of thought already, and perhaps have quite a clear idea of what you would like to do at university. There will be others who have given it absolutely no thought until you started watching this presentation. And that's absolutely normal, and it's not necessarily a problem. At the same time, there will be, you'll all span a sort of second spectrum that's more related to anxiety. And there will be some of you who are not worried about this at all. And there will be others who are already feeling quite concerned about, submitting a really good application, making these big decisions about your future. The really important sort of health warning that I want to give you all now, and the key message to come out of this entire talk really, is that yes, it's time to start thinking about what you would like to do after sixth form. However, there is plenty of time and lots of support available to help you make those decisions. Okay, so we need to start thinking about what we'd like to do after sixth form, but there is absolutely no need to be worrying or panicking about it, and there is no need to feel like you're in a sort of mad rush to make really significant decisions about your future. Okay, it's all about, at this point, exploring your options and beginning the process. So with those sort of initial announcements in place, I'm going to sort of jump straight into it. So the question is, how will you be applying to university? And that question sort of makes an assumption, and the assumption is that you will all apply to university. But actually that in itself is worth giving some consideration to. There are other options post-18 other than university. Some of you might want to enter employment straight away. We've had students in the past who've decided that they're very keen to, for example, join the police, and so they've gone down more workplace-based training routes. There's lots and lots of apprenticeship schemes available as well. And then there's university, which has been by far the most popular post-18 routes in our experience. But it's really important to think of the pros and cons of going to university. And here I've kind of put some of the upsides. One is that it's an opportunity to really pursue a subject that you love. Hopefully you're enjoying your A-level subjects. You're not just doing them to get a qualification or because you didn't know what else to do. By this point in your academic careers, you might have actually found that subject that you have a real natural affinity for, or that you're very genuinely interested in. And when you go to university, it really allows you to immerse yourself in that subject that you love, to collaborate with very like-minded people in terms of the other students on the course, and to learn with genuine experts in the field. The people who are teaching you at university are often published authors in their own fields. They're researchers. They're not just teachers. They're genuine academics and real experts in their own disciplines. University is also a chance to develop what we would call transferable skills. That would be things like research skills, independent learning, teamwork, verbal and written communication. All of those kind of things that you require to be successful at university will also stand you in good stead in any other career path that you go into. And that's an important point, because lots of degree subjects at university don't necessarily train you to do a particular job. For example, I did a history degree, and lots of my friends off my course have ended up in fields like public relations or marketing or law. And our history degree didn't teach us how to do those jobs, but it did help us to develop great skills of research and source evaluation, and being able to communicate effectively in writing, to analyze evidence, to construct an argument. And those skills have been transferable into a wide variety of other careers. University is also an essential prerequisite for certain career paths. There are some professions that require you to have a very, very specific degree. Ultimately, if you want to go into something like medicine or veterinary science, then there's a fairly narrow range of courses that you would have to do in order to be qualified for those professions. There's lots of other professions that don't require you to have a specific degree, but they are only open to graduates. So you would need a degree in something. There is also data to suggest that graduates earn more money over the course of their careers. So the Institute for Fiscal Studies have estimated that graduates earn 35% more than people who leave school and go directly into employment. There's lots of, I wouldn't want to oversimplify things. There are lots of contextual factors that would affect that figure, such as the particular university courses you were doing, or where you went, or the profession you were trying to enter. University also gives you, depending on the degree you're doing, quite a lot of spare time to play with, and you can use that in an intelligent way to increase your employability. So when I was in the third year of my degree, I only had 4 hours of lectures a week. I had quite a high workload in terms of reading and independent learning to do, but it meant that I also had time to be doing work experience. You've got very long holidays at university. You end up being off for like 5-6 months of the year, and so lots of big companies will run summer internship schemes. So it's a real opportunity for you to try out different professions, or even to have a part-time job, because your timetable sort of generally not as busy as it would be at school. There are some exceptions to that. Generally, science-based degrees will have you on the university site in the labs more than an arts-based degree or a humanities subject. And finally, one of the big pros of going to uni for lots of students is it's a chance often to leave home, to live independently, to be living in a different area of the country, and to meet people from a huge diversity of backgrounds. It's kind of a chance to step out of the bubble that you might have grown up in and that you've lived in your life up to this point, and kind of see a different side to our society, or a bit, greater variety, really. So that can be quite eye-opening as well. However, for all the positives, there are some downsides to going to university, and part of our job as teachers is to give you impartial, high-quality advice and guidance about all of your options post-18. And so, although the majority of you will end up applying to university, it's important for us to be aware of kind of the limitations of that path, or the disadvantages of it. So, as I've alluded to already, lots of university courses do not equip you with job-specific technical skills. A small number of degrees do, like medicine, but lots of other degree subjects, when you finish the 3-year course, you're not actually going to be qualified to do anything. And so you might need to do postgraduate qualifications or further workplace training, before you're actually able to embark on your career path. And for some people, they decide that it's therefore more efficient to go down an apprenticeship route and get straight on with that workplace-based learning. Lots of students are also surprised at how little contact time they have at university. Again, I've alluded to this. As a history undergraduate, I had 4 hours a week in third year. I think I had about 8 hours a week in my second year. That's not very much. As a year 13 student doing 3 A-levels at Waldegrave, you're getting 15 hours of teaching. So often, and that's free, you're not having to pay for it. Often people are quite surprised that they pay so much for their tuition fees, sort of £9,000 a year, but then end up doing a lot of the learning by themselves. So, that's something to be aware of as well. For those of you who are really good independent learners and you have that kind of self-discipline and motivation, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're someone who wants to be more busy, or to have more of a routine, or to be more directed in what you're doing, it might not be such a good thing. There is also an enormous financial commitment to university, and generally, graduates leave with really significant debts. So research by the Sutton Trust estimates that graduates in 2015 left university with an average of £44,000 worth of debt. And that is debt that you incur through your tuition fee payments, which, as I've already said, are about £9,000 a year. Often students will get a loan as well to cover their living costs. Banks often allow students to have quite significant interest-free overdrafts that then do start charging interest once you've finished university. And so it's very easy to sort of rack up debt while you're studying. Now, that's not necessarily something to be fearful of. No one should be put off going to university purely by the cost. It's not necessarily a really bad debt. No one's going to be banging down your door to chase you for the money. The repayments of your student loan are linked to your earnings. So you'll only have to start paying back the loan when you're earning a certain amount of money. And then the amount that you pay back each month will be proportional to your income. So, you might, if you're earning, let's say, hypothetically, £35,000 a year, a few years after you finished uni, you might find that you end up paying about £200 a month out of your salary, and it usually will come out with your tax and other deductions. Okay, so it's not that it's an unmanageable debt, but it is still a cost that you want to factor into your decision making. It's also a major commitment of time. Most degrees are at least 3 years, some are longer, and will involve 4-year courses. And that's a lot of time to devote to one subject, and if you've got other aspirations in terms of employment or traveling, other things you want to do, it can feel like a big investment of time. And there's also not necessarily a guarantee of employment after completing your degree. So, once you've got that qualification, you're going to have to compete with all the other thousands of graduates for a job. And it's not uncommon for graduates to end up having a period of unemployment after they finish university, or to end up having to take on further study, postgraduate study, or to enter jobs that maybe don't actually require you to have a degree even, while you then look for that graduate level work. So again, I'm a good example of that. Embarrassingly, I got rejected from a job in a petrol station when I had a degree, and I ended up working in a bar for a year while I assessed my options and applied for different things before I decided to do my teacher training, which is postgraduate study. So, it's not necessarily that once you've done university, you're kind of guaranteed anything at the end. So there are pros and cons to it. I'm not trying to kind of tell you have to apply as such, or really deter you from doing it. What I'm doing there is giving you impartial information so that you can make your own decision. This, though, is what I am telling you to do. This is our school advice. So we advise all of our students to make a university application or a UCAS application. And we give that advice to students who are very certain they want to go to university. We give that same advice to students who are kind of on the fence, they're not really sure. We give that advice to students who are adamant they don't want to go to university and are applying for apprenticeships instead. And the reason we tell everyone to make a UCAS application is it guarantees that you're guided through the process. It means you know how to apply for university in case you have to do it without our help in the future. But most importantly, it allows you to keep your options open until the last possible moment. So applying for university, it takes a few hours of work to put together the application. It costs about £25, but that's a relatively small price to pay to keep the option of university on the table right up until results day at the end of year 13. Applying to university doesn't prevent you from applying for apprenticeships. It doesn't prevent you applying for Art Foundation or for Conservatoire. It doesn't prevent you from applying for jobs. It doesn't even prevent you from applying to other universities abroad. So we would encourage everyone to do a UCAS application to British universities. And then if you want to apply to other things as well, we can support you with that also. Applying to university also doesn't mean that you are tied into going. Sending off your UCAS application isn't like signing a contract. You've not made a commitment to go. You can withdraw your UCAS application at any time. You could reject all your offers from the universities. You can defer your entry to the following year. So there's really no downside to doing a UCAS application. There's no downside at all, but there's a big upside to doing it, which is that it allows you to keep the option of going to university right up until the last possible moment on A-level results day in the summer after year 13. And that's really what we would encourage everyone to do, is to keep those options open. Okay, so we will sort of be hassling everyone to be registering for UCAS later in the year and putting together their application. And that's the reason why. What we can't do, though, is force you to make an application. We can strongly advise you, which we are doing, and we can really encourage you and we can remind you. But ultimately, the application has to go from you, the student. And therefore, if you sort of adamantly refuse, there's not much we can do about that. But hopefully our advice is clear and the logic behind it is apparent to you. So what we're going to do now is run through the application process. So the first thing that students, or that you will need to do in order to submit a university application, is research the type of course that you would want to do. So there are many thousands of university courses available. There are all sorts of subjects that you would never have even thought existed. The University of Birmingham does a degree in golf management, for example. So there's some really out there courses that you might not have heard of. There's also things that you may have heard of, but that you haven't had the chance to study at A-level. And then there are your more traditional subjects that align, to the kinds of things that you have had the opportunity to study at school, things like languages or English or sciences. So the key thing you need to start doing is researching your course choices. And later in the presentation, I'll take you through some ways of actually going about doing that. But you need to decide what it is you want to apply for. The next thing you need to do is research your universities, the institution that you might like to go to. So on your UCAS application, you're allowed to put down 5 choices. of course/university. So for most students, that means applying to the same or similar courses at 5 different universities. Some people will apply to multiple courses at the same university, but that's more unusual. Again, there are hundreds of universities, and they're all a little bit different, in terms of where they're located geographically. Are they in the town? Are they in the countryside? How near or far away from home are they? Some are on a campus, some are scattered around a city. So there's lots to consider there as well. Once you've decided on your course and university choices, you will be able to make your application. So generally, all university applications need to go through UCAS in the UK. There are some exceptions to that. There's a small number of private universities that's often like specialist film schools and things like that who have their own application procedures. And there are different application processes for Art Foundation courses. Normally in the case of Art Foundation, you apply directly to the institutions, and Conservatoire, which is for sort of practical music courses. They have their own application system as well, which is run through UCAS, but it's a specialized version of it. So the deadlines for you as Year 12 students, current Year 12 students applying for UCAS, will vary depending on what you're applying for. There's an early entry deadline, which is in October of this year, and that will be for students applying for dentistry, veterinary science, medicine, and all courses at Oxford or Cambridge. We also encourage most students to try and apply as close to that early entry deadline as possible, because the universities do start giving offers out as soon as they begin receiving applications. So it's a good thing to sort of get it done as soon as possible. It's a weight off your mind and it allows you to focus on your studies. However, the final deadline for everyone else is the 15th of January, which will be 2022 for you guys. We will show you how to register for UCAS and link your application to the school in the summer term of Year 12, and we will get you working on your applications in that summer term and then finishing them off in the autumn term of Year 13. So you don't need to take any action to set up your application at the moment, but that's the kind of process and the timeline. It's possible that once you've submitted your application, that some of you might need to do an entry exam or an assessment of some kind. This won't apply to everybody. It will only, in fact, apply to a minority of students. But some courses do require you to take a written assessment or an entry exam. Generally, that will be applicable to students applying for Oxbridge, for medicine courses, and for law courses. Most of those exams take place in October or November of 2001, so around the 2021. So around the time of the early entry deadline, the school is able to run the majority of those entry exams. So for most of you, you would be able to sit them here. You would just need to tell us that you wanted signing up for them. Some of you might also get invited to interview. Again, that's mostly applicable for students applying for Oxbridge or for medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, and also creative arts courses. It's really common for students applying for things like fine art, photography, Art Foundation, or even courses like architecture to be interviewed, because they will often want to look at some of your physical work, a sort of a portfolio, and talk through that with you. So when students are invited for interview, we always endeavour to provide at least one practice interview. Sometimes we're able to offer more. And generally speaking, those interviews will take place in December. Certainly for Oxbridge, that's when they will take place. For some of the creative arts courses, they can drag on sort of into the new year, into January, February, March time as well. Most students, however, won't be interviewed. It's only for those small number of courses that it's commonplace. Once the universities have had the chance to assess your application, look at the results of any assessments, go through the interview process, they will then take a holistic view of all the available information, which means they will look at all of it. They will take it all into account, and they will decide whether or not to make you an offer. So universities can respond to your application in a variety of ways. One way is they can just say no thank you, and they can reject you. But generally speaking, if you've made kind of sensible choices, they will often give you an offer. Sometimes that will be an unconditional offer, which means you've just got the place regardless of your A-level results. But the most common response from universities is that they will give you a conditional offer. And what that means is they are offering you a place as long as you achieve certain grades in your A-levels. The universities, as I've already said, will begin making offers as soon as they start receiving applications. So you kind of want to get your applications sent off as early as you can, really, in October, November time, so that you can get those offers coming in as soon as possible. It's a real confidence boost. When you're receiving the offers, you don't actually need to do anything with them for quite a long time. Sometimes students think they have to reply to their offer very quickly, and that's absolutely not what you have to do. What we actually would advise is that you don't respond to any of your offers until you've received decisions from all 5 of the universities you have applied to. You will then need to, out of the offers you've been given, select 2 to take forward. So you are able to pick a university as your firm choice, which is effectively your first choice, the one you most want to go to, and then an insurance choice, which is a backup in case you don't get into your firm. The deadline for responding to most offers will be in May of 2022 for you guys. So you can see there isn't necessarily a big sort of stress or time pressure to be responding to offers. The latest you will have applied is January, and you don't have to answer the universities until May in terms of a formal response. The universities might ask you to fill in questionnaires and things like that, but you don't need to pick your firm and insurance choice until quite late into year 13. Around that same time, you will also be applying for student finance should you want it. Student finance will cover the whole cost of your tuition fees, and then you may be able to get some additional funding to support you with your living expenses. And that funding for the living expenses is means tested, so the amount that you receive will depend on your household income. We will brief students on the arrangement for student finance, and we will write a letter home to parents and carers as well, but it's not something that we're able to provide loads of help with because it requires a lot of personal financial information that we wouldn't have access to. Student finance applications are really something where you need to work closely with your parents to get the information in. But you want to apply for your student finance by May, normally, is the deadline, in order to guarantee receiving funds for the start of term. It is possible to apply for student finance later than that, but they won't necessarily guarantee you receiving the money for the start of term. And that can cause problems with the universities and the halls of residence. And perhaps for you as students, you might be thinking it would also ruin freshers. So you want to kind of get that application done by May. It generally opens in February, so you've got a big window of time, but it is quite a fiddly, frustrating process that often requires you to dig out lots of paperwork. The next step of the process then is A-level results day. So once you've applied to uni, received your offers, responded to them, applied for your student finance, there's actually a couple of months where your focus really is just on trying to get the best possible A-level results. And then on A-level results day, the universities will have access to your A-level results, and they will then be able to see whether or not you've met the conditions for your firm choice. If you have met the conditions for your firm choice, you've got the right grades, you will automatically have your place confirmed. If you've not met the conditions for your firm choice, the university might make an exception and let you in anyway. If you've just narrowly missed it, that sometimes happens. However, if you haven't got the grades for your firm choice and they're not willing to make an exception, you may then get into your insurance choice if you've met the conditions for that. If you haven't met the conditions for either your firm or insurance choice, and neither institution is willing to make an exception, then you will enter something called clearing, which is effectively a marketplace for all the leftover university spots. There are sometimes really good university places in clearing. So it's not sort of leftovers in the sense of them not being good or being undesirable. Sometimes you'll get places at really prestigious universities in clearing just because students have pulled out or they've not met the conditions of their offer, and so they will offer them out to other people instead. So generally speaking, results day is in August. Obviously, there's lots of debate for the current year 13s about whether that will change as a result of the uncertain exam arrangements and so on. But if we assume that we've returned to some sense of normality by the time you're in year 13, it would be in August. School is open on results day for year 13 students. We have a team on site, and so we're able to give you advice about clearing and reconsidering your options or deferring entry, things like that. But generally speaking, if you've met the conditions of your offer for your firm choice, you don't actually have to do anything. It's quite an automated process. So that's the end of it. Then you start university. So that's kind of a broad overview of how the process works. What I'm going to do now is go into more detail on some of the specific elements that I've already outlined briefly. So in terms of the UCAS applications, as I've said, that's how you apply generally to university courses in the UK. We will help you register for UCAS, okay, and link your application to the school with a briefing in July of this year, so in the summer term. You don't want to be setting up your UCAS application now. It's too soon. You also don't really want to preempt our briefing and go and do it yourself before you've listened to our instructions, because we want you to not just set up your application, we want you to link it to Waldegrave so that we can see what you're putting down, give you advice and guidance, check for mistakes, and provide you with a reference and so on. So just wait until we brief you to register for UCAS. I've already said the early entry deadline is in October, and the main deadline is in January. We really encourage you, again, as I've already said, to apply early so that you can start getting your offers in. And I've already mentioned the separate application arrangements for art foundations, for conservatoires and so on. If you are applying for something like an international university somewhere abroad, or an art foundation or conservatoire, it's really important that you let either myself or Mr. Stavry, head of Year 12, know so that we can best support you. I mean, I would also say if you're applying for art foundation, it's best to let your creative arts teachers know. And if you're applying for conservatoire, it's really a good idea to let Mrs. O'Brien, the head of music, know so that we can make sure we've got the right specialist support in place for you. The box on the right of the slide shows you the different component parts of the UCAS application. It's divided up into sections. So you've got the personal information, which is effectively like biographical details. And then you've got your course and university choices, so your 5 choices. A personal statement, which is written by you, the student. It's a 4,000 character mini essay, basically, trying to explain to the admissions teams why you would be a great applicant for their course. There's a teacher reference, which is written by the school and is also 4,000 characters and is kind of also achieving the same purpose as the personal statement, and explaining why you're so great. And then you have to put in all your education and qualifications, including your GCSEs, the A-levels you're doing. You can also put in things like Duke of Edinburgh, sports qualifications, music grades. And then finally, there's the predicted grades, which are entered by the school as being the sort of grades we think you're likely to achieve in your final A-level results. Okay? Zooming into a bit more detail there on the course and university choices, there's 37,000 courses at approximately 130 universities in the UK. So that's not meant to be daunting, but it does mean you need to quite methodically research your options. I'm just going to pause and have a sip of water. So you need to do your research. You end up putting down a total of 5 choices. Our advice is to put similar courses at different universities. So for example, you might apply for geography at Bristol, Exeter, Nottingham, Cardiff and Bournemouth. So you're doing the same course but at different institutions. It's generally not advisable to pick your favourite uni and then apply for 5 different courses there, because what that is going to seem like to the university is that you're not actually that invested in the course, that you more just want to kind of live in a certain place. They really want to feel like you're passionate about the particular course you're doing. So it makes more sense to apply for the same or similar courses. Sometimes people have a little bit of variation. You might apply for psychology at 3 universities and then sports psychology at a 4th one, or you might apply for sociology at 2 universities and criminology at another 2, and sociology and anthropology at a 5th one. So it's fine to have a little bit of variation, but there should be a common theme to your choices. That's also important because you're only allowed to write 1 personal statement that goes to all 5 of your choices. And so if you're trying to apply to 5 totally different courses, it makes it almost impossible to write a personal statement that would work for all of them. It's also really advisable to vary the entry requirements of the universities you want to go to. So Every university will publish entry requirements, which are the typical grades that you would have to achieve in order to get a place there. It's a good idea to apply for some that are aspirational, that are slightly maybe above what you're most likely to get in your A-levels, to give yourself the chance of getting into, a really top university. But you also want to put some slightly safer choices in. You want at least one of your 5 choices to be one that has entry requirements you should be able to meet very, very comfortably, even if something goes wrong. And that means you've got a backup option in case things don't go to plan for you next year. There are some limitations on your choices. You can only apply to Oxford or Cambridge, not both, and you can only apply for 4 medicine courses. So the 5th would normally be a related thing like biomedical science. So this box on the right tells you how we advise you to structure your choices. So we would say you want one aspirational choice. So that would be entry requirements that are slightly above your ALPS target grades, or the grades that you're being predicted. So, for example, if your ALPS target grades are 3Bs, your aspirational choice might be a university that's asking for ABB or AAB. So it would rely on you doing a little bit better than average in one subject or more. Okay. Then we would advise you to put 2 secure choices. So these would be universities where your entry requirements are either like the same as your ALPS target grades, or the grades you're being predicted in your monitoring. So that's pretty obvious. If your ALPS targets are 3As, then your secure choices would be universities that are asking for 3As. Then we would advise you to put 2 safe choices in. So these would be universities where the entry requirements are slightly below your targets. So again, to give you a hypothetical scenario, let's say your target grades are 3Bs. You might put in a university that was asking for BBC, or a university that was asking for BCC, for example. Now, typically, students, you're really good at finding the aspirational choices. And some of you might decide to put more than one aspirational choice. You might decide to put 2. And generally, you're able to find the secure choices. Typically, where people don't want to follow our advice is around the safe choices. There's often a real reluctance from students to put down those safe choices. And we quite often hear you saying things like, I'd rather not go to university at all than go there. That's a rubbish university. Why would I apply to that? But actually, there's lots of different ways to measure the quality of university. Often you might have preconceptions based on sort of prestige or the brand of the university. But if you look at measures like student satisfaction and graduate employment rates, often some of the lesser known universities that have lower entry requirements rates very favorably. Okay. Also, I've heard a million times from students, I would not go to that university, I'd rather not go at all. But it's amazing how often people change their mind on results day if they haven't quite got the results they're looking for. Putting down those safe choices means that if you have to have time off in year 13 because you're really ill and that affects your exam performance, or something goes wrong at exam time, you get super stressed out and don't perform as well as you wanted to, that you've got a backup plan, you've got a way of moving on to the next phase of your education. So we really would encourage you to try and structure your choices like that. There is absolutely no point really applying for 5 universities that all have the same entry requirements, because you'll probably either get offers from all of them or none of them. And if you get offers from all of them and they've got the same entry requirements, the conditions of the offer are also likely to be identical. And that means that you will end up having your firm and insurance choices both with the same conditions attached to them. And that means, again, on results day, you'd either get into your firm or you'd get into nothing. You want to put choices on your application that allows you to have an insurance choice on results day with a lower set of conditions than your firm choice, so it acts as a backup. So these are some of the questions you might want to consider when you're thinking about your course and university choices. How far away from home do you want to be? Campus or a city university? What else is going on in the area in terms of culture and shopping and nightlife? Do the university guarantee halls of residence in the first year, which is accommodation? How much does it cost to rent property in the area, which you'll probably do in your second and third year? What's the cost of living like in terms of taxis and food? What are the facilities like in the area? Is there a gym? Are there cinemas? Where's the supermarket? What sports teams and societies does the university have? You also might think, those questions were more about the university itself, the institution. These questions are more about the course. How is it assessed? Is it more coursework? Is it more exam? How well regarded are the staff? How much do you enjoy the subject that you're thinking of applying for? What are the specific modules or option choices that they have within the course? Is there a year abroad or an industry placement? What are the graduate employment prospects? Is it a 3 or 4 year course? Those are all really important questions. Something that people are often not aware of is that you could take the exact same university course, but it would be, run differently depending on the university you go to. So, if you were doing an English literature degree at Bristol, it might be quite different to the same English literature degree at King's, because the particular poems or books that they covered would vary depending on the expertise of their staff. So, you really do need to drill down into the detail of the courses that you're applying for. When it comes to the personal statement, that's a short reflective essay. You're trying to persuade the universities you're a suitable candidate. Often this is the bit that creates the most workload and anxiety for you as the student, because you have to work through lots of drafts. It's quite difficult. It's not that easy writing about yourself and how great you are. But it's also extremely important, because generally the people applying for your courses will probably be doing similar A-levels to you, and they'll probably have similar predicted grades. So the personal statement is the only chance for you to personalize your application and really stand out from the crowd. There are some rules. 4,000 character limit. A character is any letter, space, punctuation, or line break. It can also only be 47 lines when you enter it into UCAS, but that's not a helpful measure when you're drafting it, because the box on UCAS is kind of an arbitrary size that doesn't correlate to your Word document. So 4,000 characters. For most people, that ends up being just over a page of kind of typing, a standard size of font. We will support you with your personal statement. You do not really need to be thinking about it at the moment. In the summer term, in June, we will do a personal statement workshop with you where we will explain to you in detail how to write it. We will give you a guidebook that has examples in and that breaks it down and gives you a structure. Your form tutors will give you feedback. Your subject teachers will be happy to look at it. So, that's not something you need to stress out too much about now. This is a rough structure. So you do a short introduction, then you would have a longer section on your academic studies. So that would be your A-levels. Then you would have another long section on your supercurricular activities. Those are things you do outside of your A-levels that are directly related to the degree you want to apply for. So for example, if you were applying to do a German degree, going and volunteering at like a charity in Munich, that would be a supercurricular activity, because although it's out of school, it is very clearly directly relevant to the course you're applying for. You would then have a much smaller section on your extracurricular activities. Those are things you do outside of your studies that are not directly related to the course you're applying for. So like if you were applying to do that same German degree, the fact that you're grade 4 piano, that is an extracurricular activity, because playing piano doesn't make you good at German. Okay, and then you do a short conclusion. The biggest misconception that people have about personal statements is that they want to write far too much about their extracurricular activities and there's not enough of an academic focus. That's the biggest mistake people make. It is ultimately about proving to the admissions team at the universities you're applying for that you are going to be successful on that degree program. So that it's interesting for them to know what your hobbies are, but they're not going to let you do a degree because you have this vast range of leisure activities that you're great at. They're going to let you onto the degree because they think that you're passionate about the subject and that you're academically capable of succeeding at it. The teacher reference is something that we will take care of. Again, it's an extended piece of writing. It's comprised of an introduction, which is giving context on the school. And then there is a paragraph for each of the subjects you study. So for most of you, that will be 3 paragraphs, 1 for each subject. If you're doing 4 subjects, it will be 4 paragraphs. And those paragraphs will be written by one of your subject teachers in each of those areas. And your form tutor will edit all of that together so that it has a flow to it and it feels like it's been written by one person. And they will also add their own endorsement at the end as well. Again, we've got limits. It can only be 4,000 characters, so we can't put everything in there. You will be allowed to read it as the student before it's sent off. When we send the applications, you will sit down and have an in-person meeting with either me or Mr. Stavry, your head of year, and we will go through the application, make any final changes, check for mistakes, and we will let you read the reference. And if there's specific things that you feel like you might want to change, we're happy to, within reason, discuss that with you. We also can, if we want to, put some individual context in there, and this is sort of more directed to both students but also to parents who are watching. That individual context might be around things like special education needs, a family situation, health problems, physical or mental, that we think it would be beneficial for the university to know about, either so they can put in place the right support when you go there, or because it gives context to other pieces of information on the application, like your GCSE results, for example. So to give you a scenario where we might put in context, if you had been able to do GCSEs as normal, which of course you weren't, but you'd been really, really ill with glandular fever when exams were happening, your GCSE grades would probably be lower than you were really capable of achieving. So we would probably want to write that context in to kind of explain why those results were the way they were. Okay, so that individual context is something that we can sort of negotiate together. The education qualifications section is really easy. It's a bit fiddly, but it's not ultimately very difficult. You have to report all of your qualifications. You can't not put things in because you aren't happy with the grades. You have to report all of your GCSEs and A-levels. When the universities look at these, they are often comparing the GCSE grades to the predicted grades that we've entered. Because some schools, will really inflate predicted grades, and the universities can kind of check the accuracy or the likely accuracy of the predicted grades by comparing them to the GCSEs. If you've been getting, like a 5 for something at GCSE, it's unlikely that you're then going to be getting an A star in that subject at A level unless there's some significant individual context there. So they will look at things like the GCSE grades for context, but no universities have GCSE requirements as such. Students are primarily being judged in terms of their academic ability in their UCAS application on the predicted grades and what they ultimately end up getting for their A-level results in the end. Universities also look at that data in terms of like a trajectory of progress. You don't necessarily have to have been a really, really top student the whole way through, but if they can see that you did all right at GCSEs, and then we're saying in your reference and through your predicted grades that you're doing a little bit better than that at A levels, the university might extrapolate that trend out and think, well, okay, by the end of year 13 you might be doing really quite a lot better. So they are able, or they do try and kind of think about that kind of incline of progress over the A-level program as well. If you've taken any music grades, any coaching qualifications, Duke of Edinburgh, all that can go on there as well. A lot of those things are worth UCAS points, which is another way that universities state their entry requirements sometimes. So they're worth putting on. They're especially worth putting on if they're directly relevant to the course you're applying for. If you're applying for a music theory course, then obviously the fact that you've done, grade 5 trumpet is going to enhance your application, so you'd want to put that on there. The thing students mostly do wrong on this section is we need you to put your A-levels on there with the grade set as pending, and that allows us to put in your predicted grades. I guarantee that at least a quarter of you will forget to put your A-levels on your application. Then it comes to predicted grades. This is often, again, a source of quite a lot of anxiety for people. Generally speaking, subject teachers will make a prediction of the grades they think you're likely to achieve at the end of year 13. It can be an optimistic prediction of what's likely, but it has to bear some relation to the reality of how you're doing. They go onto your UCAS application and give the unis an indication of whether you're likely to meet their entry requirements. Generally, in a normal year, we would use as our kind of benchmark a combination of your ALPS target grades and the exams that you take at the end of year 12. So we would normally give you, as a minimum, the higher of those two. Okay. At the moment, it's quite difficult for us to know what the arrangements with exams at the end of year are going to be, because we don't have clarity from the government yet about what's happening with year 11 and 13. And whatever arrangements we have to follow for those year groups are going to have a knock-on effect on what we're able to do for you. But generally speaking, we would do exams in all of your subjects at the end of year 12. And that would be kind of a good indicator. It's not as simple as saying that if you get a certain grade in one test or one exam, that's your UCAS prediction. That isn't how we operate. It's a bit more nuanced than that. We can take into account all of the assessments, the end of topic tests you've been doing through the end of year 13. We can take, through the beginning of year 12. We can even take into account the work that you do at the beginning of year 13. And the later you leave your application, the more of that year 13 work we can take into account. We do, as I've said, look at the ALPS grades and any exams we've done at the end of year 12, but we look at everything in context, okay? We'll look at all of the work that you've been doing to try and think, what is the likelihood, or what is a likely outcome for you at the end of year 13. We're not in the business of trying to hold anyone back. We don't want to give people bad predicted grades, but what we also can't do is just give you whatever you want, because that would undermine the credibility of our predictions in the eyes of the universities, and it could result in you making applications that are perhaps not realistic. So really the kind of ball is in your course as students, really. If you're doing your very best to produce good results for us over the course of year 12 and the beginning of year 13, then you should get predicted grades that you're happy with. Generally, we will release predicted grades for UCAS in July, and those will be communicated to you as soon as they've been decided. We do have an absolutely firm, non-negotiable stance that you do not ask for them before then. If you ask or hassle your teachers or try and exert pressure on your teachers for predicted grades before that point, they will just not respond to it. They will say that they're not going to talk about it. And the same thing applies to communication from parents and carers. We aren't in a position to give you predicted grades until the time that we've stated here. In the meantime, if you're researching universities, use your ALPS target grades as a guide, a rough guide of what your predicted grades are likely to be. When we do release the predicted grades, if you're confused or unhappy, there will be a process for discussing those, which will be explained to you in more detail when those grades are published in July. It's very important, though, that any of those conversations are characterized by a mature, calm and respectful tone. We will not tolerate staff being spoken to in a way that is in any way rude or disrespectful. It is an emotive topic, but if I have people saying to me things like, "You're ruining my dreams," I will not respond well to that, because staff work very, very hard. We're not in teaching for the glamour and the money. We're generally in it because we want to support young people to achieve the best they can in their lives. And we do have boundaries that we have to work within. And we need you to be respectful of that and engage in conversation, which, as I've said, is mature and calm and respectful. And that doesn't mean you can't question things and ask for clarification, but there's a manner that is acceptable for doing that. Okay? As I've said, in the meantime, use your ALPS target grades as an indicator of what predicted grades are likely to be. And it is possible that we may need to review even those arrangements that I've outlined here, vague as they currently are, in light of what happens at the end of year 12. If we're not able to do end of year 12 exams, that might mean we have to slightly modify our processes. But please bear with us in that regard. In terms of entry exams, which I've said some but not all students will have to do, it's mostly Oxbridge, medicine, law. In order to find out whether you have to do an entry exam, when you put the course onto your UCAS application as one of your choices, if you have to do an entry exam, a red notification will normally appear on your UCAS application that says if you're applying for this course, you have to sit this entry exam. The other way of finding out is to look at the course pages on the university's website, and they will normally tell you whether they need an entry exam or not. or you can contact admissions at the individual universities and ask if there's an entry exam. We can guide you and give you advice, but as I've said, there's 37,000 courses at 130 universities, so we don't know from the top of our heads exactly which ones do and don't require an entry exam. The school is a registered test centre for most entry exams, so you can generally sit them here. However, it's your responsibility to tell us that you want to do that entry exam, and you need to tell the examinations officer, Mrs. DeRose. There's a small fee. We're not making a sort of profit on it. We get charged by the exam boards for sitting them, for entering you, so we'll pass that cost on to you. As I've said, I've already said this once, but I want it to be really crystal clear. You must tell us that you want to be entered for the entry exam, and you must tell us before the deadline for registering. That's really important. We do not have the ability to predict or preempt which entry exams you might need to do. We're totally reliant on you informing us, and we will send you lots and lots of reminders, but it is ultimately your responsibility to know whether or not you have to do an entry exam and to sign up for it by the appropriate deadline. Generally, the registration deadline for the majority of entry exams is October, the same as the early entry deadline, and they're then normally sat in October or November, just a month or so later. I have to say, and I do have experience of this, there is an absolutely zero tolerance policy on late registration for entry exams, particularly for Oxford and Cambridge. It does not matter who you speak to. You can try and move heaven and earth. If you miss that deadline by even 1 minute, they will not register you. So it is really important that you make yourself aware of what you need to do and that you keep the school notified. On the right here, the box tells you some of the more common entry exams. So wherever you're applying to university, if you're going for law, you will often have to do the LNAT. If you're applying for medicine, you will normally have to do either the BMAT or the UCAT, depending on where you're applying for, sometimes both. Most of the other ones are for Oxford and Cambridge, so they've got all sorts of different tests that they do. Again, the ones that we see really commonly would be the TSA, which is for science courses, STEP or MAT for maths, the ELAT for English literature, and the HAT for history. Those are the ones that we've had students sitting most commonly. But there is a wide variety there. You're very welcome to ask your subject teachers to help you prepare, and there's always lots of practice resources online. If you've got private tutors, or you're willing to get one, they can help you as well. What we don't have is a kind of a specific intervention class or a specific coaching or teaching program for entry exams. It's not feasible for us to do that because in any given year, the number of students doing entry exams can vary quite significantly, and we only ever end up with 1 or 2 students doing each different exam. So, and each exam is totally unique. So it wouldn't be feasible for us to be able to provide real coaching in the entry exams. But for example, if you were doing, let's say, STEP maths, and you went to your maths teacher or to the head of maths and said, would we be able to go through a couple of these papers, then normally teachers will be amenable to that and they'll try and help. I've helped lots of students with the history aptitude test in the past. So do ask for our help, but be aware that it's not something that we're going to give sort of intensive preparation for. If you are invited to interview, which again will be a minority, Oxford, Cambridge, medicine, creative arts, dentistry, veterinary science, those will generally take place in December for Oxbridge and others at various times throughout the year. If you do get invited for interview, please tell myself or Mr. Stavru, the head of year, as soon as possible so that we can try and organise you a really good quality practice interview. With Oxbridge applicants, everyone who applies, we will just give practice interviews to, because the gap from you being told you're going to interview and then actually having to do it is so small that it's better just to prepare everyone for that eventuality. But it's really, really important, particularly for students when you're applying for creative arts courses, that you let us know as soon as possible, because there is quite a lot of work involved in trying to secure people with the right expertise to do that practice interview with you. Often as well, if you're doing a creative arts interview, you'll need to take a portfolio with you, and we can help you put that together. But again, we need time to work with. It's really not helpful if you get told that you're invited for an interview and you get told in kind of December, the interview's in February, and you tell us 2 days before you're going to it when you've known for 2 months. The more time you give us to work with, the more we will be able to help you. In terms of school support for this whole process, there's lots of things that we would normally do, and the vast majority of them we will still be able to do, even though we're operating in a more challenging context at the moment. One thing we're probably not going to be able to do is the UCAS exhibition, which would normally be at Brunel University in March. Normally that's how we launch our UCAS process, and it's a big sort of university fair essentially, where all the different institutions have a stand and representatives to talk to you. We're not going to be able to run that this year. The exhibition isn't even taking place, and we're not running school trips at the moment. I keep looking out for replacements for it, but at the moment UCAS haven't arranged a kind of online or virtual alternative, but I will keep you posted if that changes. We always do our higher education evening for parents. In January, it says here, beginning of February, we've ended up doing it. That's kind of what you're watching now. There's also going to be a tutor time focus for you as students over the next few weeks. So if we had been in school, your form tutors would have been using the Wednesday PDC sessions in tutor time to go over various aspects of getting you ready for applying for university. I'm going to do pre-recorded video versions of that instead, so you're not going to miss out. We will do the personal statement briefing in the summer. Hopefully we'll be back in school by then and we'll be able to do it in person. Last year we weren't in school, but we live streamed it instead. So I think I've got the record for live streaming to the most students in the school. We did a live stream to nearly 200 people to do that personal statement briefing, so you're not going to miss out. We would do a UCAS registration briefing around the same time. Again, we live streamed that last year, so it will take place regardless of whether we're in remote learning or back to face-to-face. We'll give you an electronic copy of our personal statement guidebook, and you'll get feedback on your personal statements from subject teachers and from form tutors. We would normally run a university trip in July. So in the past, we've been to University of Creative Arts, Surrey, Sussex and Southampton in various years. At the moment, I would say it's unlikely we will be able to do that, but we'll have to keep an eye on the situation. And if it becomes possible and we think it's safe and a good use of our time, then we might do it. But at the moment, it's not looking that likely. We're a registered test centre for most entry exams, so you should be able to do those here. We will give you really good quality teacher references. They go through layers and layers of scrutiny before they go on your final application. We have got a specialist Oxbridge programme. I'm going to do a briefing on that separately next week. We will do practice interviews for any of you who are invited. We will give you a student finance briefing at the time applications open for that. And our trained careers advisors, Mrs. Holmes and Miss Mayer, are available at any time. You can email in to careers@waldegravesch.org. And they'll be happy to talk to parents on the phone. They'll be happy to arrange a one-on-one Google Meet with students. They're there to help you at any point. So that's the school support that's available. It's a pretty comprehensive program. On top of those more formal things, myself, Mr. Stavru, are fully expecting that we will be having lots and lots of individual conversations with students who are not sure which path they want to go down, and form tutors are willing to do that as well. So are subject teachers. So there's lots of kind of informal support there as well as those kind of more structured events. So in terms of next steps, what you need to do going away from this presentation really isn't much. This is about introducing you to the process and getting you to start thinking. But as you will have seen, most of the big actions are going to come in the summer term. So it's not something you need to be stressing out about now. These are the 3 priorities, things that you can be doing, tomorrow, the next few weeks and months to get ready for preparing for university. Okay, so one thing you can be doing now is researching your course and university choices. So that's going to be the focus of one of the pre-recorded tutor times I'm going to do for you next Wednesday. Where I'll give you some more specific information on how you can do that research. But start thinking about those questions I gave you in the presentation on the course and university choice slides. Discuss those with your friends, think about them yourself, talk about them with your family. You can also go to the course pages of university websites. On the UCAS website, there are course guides. And there's a great website called What Uni. I've put in the text there on this slide, which is a search engine for university places. It's like Google for university places. So you can put in different search parameters like the subject you want to do, your likely A-level grades, whether you want to be in the town or the countryside, which area of the country you want to be in. And then it brings up a whole load of like every university course that matches your search parameters in a very palatable and easy to view way that tells you the entry requirements, and then you can click on the different links for more information. So that's a really good tool. You can be preparing for writing your personal statement. Don't start writing it yet because you haven't been taught how to do that. That briefing will come in the summer, but you can start gathering relevant experiences. So if you've been doing things like work experience, virtual work experience counts as well. If you've managed to do anything like volunteering, if you've done any online courses that relate to the subject you want to apply for, if you've been doing wider reading, kind of reading books about the subject you might want to apply for at university, all of that kind of stuff will help you. If I was supporting a student applying for a history degree, I would expect them to have read a couple of books by historians that are not part of our A-level course. Okay, so you can be doing that sort of wider reading now. That does take a little bit of time. The most important thing you can be doing, though, is just trying to maximize your academic progress. Ultimately, to get into universities, you need to achieve certain grades in your A-levels. And so the single best thing you can do to help your university application is try your best to succeed at your subjects. And I know that's really difficult at the moment because you're not being taught in the same way. It can be quite demotivating and not that exciting doing remote learning. And I know that you've now been affected by this twice in the last year. So I do appreciate that it's easier said than done to really try and succeed in the academic side of things. But notice what I said there is try your best. So making sure you're going to your live streamed lessons, making sure that you're submitting work on the Google Classrooms, making sure that when you're uncertain about what to do, that you're emailing teachers your questions or asking for a Google Meet, that you're going to the drop-in Q&As they might be doing, that you're watching the pre-recorded videos, that you're working through the tasks they set you, all of that kind of stuff. And then when you're back in school face-to-face, that you really make the most of that experience as well. You just want to try and keep moving forward and do as well as you can. So those are the three things to be focused on right now. Okay. Normally, or here's some key dates. None of this is new. I've been through these already in the presentation. This is just meant to be a more sort of palatable way of you viewing them. Normally at this point, we would have the opportunity for questions if we were doing this as a live event. Clearly, we don't have that opportunity at the moment. I'm sat in a room, been talking to myself now for an hour and 7 minutes. But if you do have questions, you're very welcome to email them in to, if it's a question from you as a parent or carer, email it into sixthform@waldegravesch.org. If it's a question from you as a student, then you're very welcome to just use your school email and contact me or Mr. Stavru or whoever the relevant person is directly. I've mentioned as well that careers, if you want an appointment with a careers advisor, is careers@waldegravesch.org as well. Okay, so that is the end. If you've managed to stay listening throughout, congratulations, well done. It has been a long, hard slog for you, I'm sure. Thank you very much. I hope that's been helpful and clear. Do let me know if you've got questions, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Goodbye.